Do you know how dangerous it is to ride the HRT? Do you know how dangerous it is to ride the HRT? Do you know how dangerous it is to ride the HRT? And I'm not speaking about hormone replacement therapy, honey. I'm talking about the Hampton Roads Transit System in Norfolk, Virginia. Do you have any idea how dangerous it was for me as a teenager to get on that bus every day to school, work, and back? Do you know what it's like to negotiate to the world when your body doesn't visually align in the spaces and places among your peers? Do you have any idea what it meant for me to pass as a girl in a neighborhood that saw my trans identity as a pink elephant? Yeah, pink was my favorite color. But just by being yourself as a teenager, you now have a target on your back, and at any moment could turn to humiliation, hurt, and hell, who knows what. Do you know what it could have done for me to have had gender affirming care, doctors, and a therapist when I was a teenager that could explain to my mother all of the benefits of hormone replacement therapy and hormone blockers could provide, and how these treatments could not only help me look like myself, but also support my physical safety? Just imagine what it would mean for me to step on the HRT with HRT and walk fully unapologetically without fear or paranoia to my seat on that bus. How I would wake up and look in the mirror and really actually recognize myself. I bet most of you wake up every day feeling like yourself. We don't. And without the approval of our parents or money for gender affirming care, do you know how dangerous it is to get hormone replacement therapy on the streets, transforming your legislative disapproval and parental denial into a syringe? It could be the very last time you see your child alive. I know that all too well. At age 14, I went to the streets to find women's hormones, and I paid $40 a week for a shot. I also paid $75 a month for my cell phone. That was the extent of the gender affirming care that I could provide for myself. That $40 shot allowed me to develop breasts just like the other girls, ease my dysphoria, and get on that bus with less threat. And that $75 phone line, that was my lifeline. My sanity to call someone when I needed a kind voice who understood me. My security when I was being threatened. And then later, the link to my customer connections. Because one of the few ways as a trans teenager living in poverty could pay for that phone and those hormones on their own was by starting survival sex work. And do you have any idea how dangerous survival sex work can be? On my first night on the stroll, my best friend and I went out. She got beaten, robbed, raped, and sent back home naked. No, y'all don't have any idea. And even with my money, getting hormones wasn't easy. The street market flow just isn't consistent. Sometimes I could buy a hormone shot. Other times I could just get birth control pills or even pay to use a girlfriend's patch. Y'all know. My hormone levels were all over the place. And because this was the streets and not a real endocrinologist, I didn't have access to hormone blockers. So as I got older, the testosterone levels rose, and with it, more masculine features. And eventually, those hormone shots were no longer enough to suffice that I passed as a girl. At the age of 15, after moving across town in a new neighborhood, I was attacked by 5 big grown men. I was only 4 feet, 10 inches tall and shy of 100 pounds. I stood no damn chance. I remember being in the ER, the doctor bandaging me up and telling me, "I'm afraid your nose is broken." I'm still shaking, blood all over me, and crying out, sobbing. But I didn't do anything wrong. I'm just trying to live my life. Why do people care what I do? Why can't I be me? Why? Why? You don't make it to 15 as a young, black, trans girl living in poverty without having some fight in you. And I was determined not to let my abusers win. But deep down inside, I knew if I was going to survive, I was going to have to pass as a real girl, and my body had to have a more feminine appearance. The only thing that gave me strength to walk out of that ER that day was the hope that if what's on the outside matched what's on the inside just a little bit more, maybe people would just leave me alone. Just leave me alone. Again, with no access to gender affirming care, I went back to the streets to seek more options. That led me to a trans woman they called the pump doctor. And honey, she didn't have to market her supplies because she didn't need to. As soon as I saw her, I was immediately struck by her beauty. And I couldn't put my finger on it. At first, she looked so feminine. And I was like, "Did you get your body done?" She was like, "Oh, yes, honey, I got silicone injected in my hips." So y'all knew what I had to do? That's exactly what the hell I wanted. I worked them streets until I raised $800 to pay for those damn injections. They didn't even hurt. It was an easy process. And boy, oh boy, did it make me feel like a woman. Can we say Shania? People started seeing me for who I really am. And within days, I was able to slip into a pair of tight-fitting jeans, a figure-hugging body dress, bodycon to the T, and really look the way that I felt inside. Simply like a bombshell. I no longer have problems coexisting with society. Now, they looked at me on the bus for the second look, but it wasn't to clock my tea, honey. But because they saw me as this gorgeous woman, I was not only safer on the streets, these new hips helped me get off the streets and get some real modeling jobs, get some real acting gigs, and help me get out of poverty. You see, originally my job aspirations was to get a degree in computer tech. But passing as a female does you no favor when everyone knows your past. A few kids from my high school went to the same college. Guess what they did? Outed me. There weren't any LGBTQ support resources or groups at the college at that time, and so many gay people I know personally got attacked on campus, some even killed. Honey, I was not going to deal with that. I dealt with enough trauma back in high school. So even though my mom always said, "No one can take your education away from you," I kept my AP grades up. Despite street walking at night, my own college career was cut short. I dropped out to protect myself. And with the power of this new, beautiful, feminine body, I went full-fledged on into adult upper echelon escorting. That brought so many opportunities. I started to make thousands of dollars. I traveled all over the globe. I met powerful clients, music stars, business leaders, politicians, celebrities. Making money and feeling empowered as a trans woman gave me a public voice. I didn't have insurance, but I could pay for those procedures in those other countries that I could not get in the United States. And I needed these procedures for both my gender dysphoria and my safety. I remember the exact moment I decided to get breast implants. True story. I got caught speeding on the highway doing 115 miles per hour. They sent my ass to jail. Honey, the whole time I was in jail, I kept thinking, oh my God, what if I was ever to be sent to jail to do real time? And for whatever reason, I couldn't access my hormones. My dysphoria would be out of control. And back then, they didn't have an obligation to give you hormones. And now they're supposed to, but their shady asses don't mean that they will. If I stopped taking hormones back then, girl, for 1 week, I would have totally lost my triple A tits. The only way I could calm myself in jail that day was deciding I would get breast implants ASAP. At least that way, I knew they couldn't steal my breasts and my body from me. They could put me in a man's uniform, they could cut my hair off, but they couldn't take away my breast. Still, with no access to insurance, no gender affirming care, or trans friendly cosmetic surgeons at the time, I had to go all the way to Guadalajara to get breast implants. But I did have the money to get that care for myself. And so, in many ways, despite all the obstacles and trauma that I faced as a young trans woman of color, I'm now in my groove, right? Happy endings, right? No. I went from happy endings to never ending. For some reason, out of nowhere, my ankle started hurting. I tried to ignore it, but the pain just kept getting worse and worse, and soon I could barely stand for any amount of time. Because I moved to New York, I now could get access to trans-affirming specialists. And although we're talking about my ankles, the doctor knew enough to ask me about my breast implants. Sure enough, my silicone gummy bear implants that I paid cash for in Mexico ruptured. He said if the implant is leaking, that it could cause neurological issues in my ankle. Well, I was prepped for surgery the next day, and I had to put on the hospital gown. You know, the one that always got your backside out. You know, the doctor walked in and saw the skin around my curvy hips and the discoloration, and he asked what work I had done. I just put my head down and started crying. He said, let's focus on the capsulized breast. But when you wake up, we're talking about this. I think we may have a deeper problem. He was true to his word. When I came around, he had so many questions. And I explained the shots of silicone I got on the streets at age 16. I later heard of other trans women dying from silicone because if it's not encapsulated, it could go into your bloodstream, travel to your heart, and cause you an instant heart attack. I thought I escaped with my life, but I didn't. The test showed that the materials injected into me were not medical grade silicone. It was toxic, carcinogenic, and the cause of the nerve damage in my hips and the pain in my feet. My mind is whirling. At 16, I got silicone shots on the streets to protect myself from possibly being killed. I ended up with this gorgeous body to die for that launched this lucrative career. But 13 years later, those same damn shots were literally killing me. Again, I'm in surgery. When I came around, they told me they managed to scrape 95% of the silicone, but he had to scrape out most of my muscle around my hip to get it out and save me from dying or ending up in a wheelchair permanently. The pain after the anesthesia wore off. Oh my God. It was excruciating, but nothing compared to the combination of fear and despair that I felt when I first peeled back that bandage and I was utterly speechless. The beautiful matching hourglass curves that once protected me and help me coexist in the world were gone. And instead, there was a giant hole in my hips where it used to be. Walking with all these muscles damaged from the scraping can be hard, that at the age of 34, I sometimes have to use a wheelchair, a cane, or a walker. With time, my doctor believes that I should be able to have reconstructive surgery on my hips. But it's been a long, hard, hell of a journey, and I'm determined to shout about what's happened to me. Because in 2024, young people should not have to pump silicone into themselves, grab hormones off the streets, or prostitute to survive. No one should have to leave the country to access feminization surgeries to control dysphoria or get breast implants simply because correctional officers won't honor your right to access hormones. Instead of moving legislation across the country that takes away gender-affirming care from young people with supportive parents, we should be expanding this care. And gender-affirming care is not just about HRT. It's about therapy, not only for trans kids, but also for their parents. It is about basic resources, safe housing, safe transportation, food, surgery, trans doctors, a phone line. All of that is gender-affirming care. I won't be silenced despite the holes in my hips. I'm using my whole life's experience to educate our communities. I'm on a journey to find, redefine, and discover who I am beyond what I had to survive. I'm going to step forward, or hell, even wheelchair my ass into the powerful truth that I was born to bring to this world and our communities. But as a short epilogue to this monologue about gender-affirming care, I have to acknowledge and honor my gay dad. I would not be alive today if it wasn't for him and his care. We met when I was 13. He wasn't even 20. We lived in one of the poorest neighborhoods in the city. And in my community, gay men and women would adopt kids. By that I mean they would step in to help them survive violence, the threat from the streets, and hell, sometimes their own parents. It was my gay dad who was just 22 when he helped me switch to a new high school, and he set up a meeting with the faculty, the principal, and was like, look, these are her pronouns. This is her name. The teachers are to use this name and do not say this name. My gay dad was rough, stern, clear, transparent, if you will. He fought for me in ways that I always wanted my mother to fight for me, but didn't have capacity. And it was my gay dad that took material from our couch cushions and sold me 3 pairs of tights with paddings at the hip, like the RuPaul Drag Race stars. He was a G with that shit. He made that until I could afford those injections. It was my gay dad who I called when I was threatened. It was my gay dad that I lived with when I was legally emancipated at the age of 16. And the only thing that man ever asked for all his care was make sure you keep your AP grades up and you graduate on time. I'm alive today because my gay dad loves me, fought for me, and cared for me. He truly was my gender-affirming care. But not everybody is as lucky as I am. So while we're fighting for legislation to make gender-affirming care happen for all people, regardless of income, let us each in our different communities emulate my dad and be a somebody for somebody. His name is Charles Cesar, AKA Angel Face, go figure, angel, huh? And I dedicate this monologue and my love to him.